right. Hello, everybody. I assume you can hear me okay. This session has a forward-looking statement slide because we like to talk about the future. And as we say in my home in Texas, y'all don't buy stuff because of what ain't finished yet. This session is a really odd session. It's Einstein language, which is sentiment and intent analysis. And we're going to put that in our org with Process Builder. And so all of this that we're going to be looking at is GA now in terms of what the products are. So there probably won't be too much of the forward-looking statement stuff. Just so I know what we're doing today, can I get a show of hands? Raise your hand if you enjoy writing code and would like to see some on the screen, okay? Raise your hand if you don't like code, and I'm an admin and I will never ever code, okay? All right, good, that helps me know what I'm about to say. All right, so my name is Shane. My job here at Salesforce is to build demos, and so when I tell people I'm a developer at Salesforce, that means, like, some people think, oh, you get to make the core product that the end users get to use, and that's not what I do. I'm kind of where the customers are, so I get to use all the tools that we have, but part of my job is I get to use them first, so that when stuff comes out, we can be like, here's a demo of how this works, because I got this 2 months ago and was building on it before y'all have seen it. All right, so I have like 4 slides, and I promise we'll spend the rest of the time on demo. So Einstein is this term that we use to cover a lot of things here at Salesforce, and I broke them down this way. There's stuff that everybody's going to want, so please score my leads, tell me which opportunities are likely to close when and for how much. Classify my cases, what should I show customers on Commerce Cloud. So those things are getting built into the core product. We don't expect those to really be a developer thing. There's also Einstein Analytics. So take all my data, which may be in Salesforce, which may be somewhere else. I would like you to be able to visualize it, and I'd like you to show me the patterns so I can say, oh, these things kind of predict these things, right? So there's the data analysis part of Einstein. Of more interest to devs and admins are the things you've seen. And so in our last, in our keynote, you probably saw some of Einstein Prediction Builder. So I have some fields here with structured data in Salesforce, and I want to predict some other fields. So what we're doing there is kind of the Salesforce play, which was we built stuff in the core app, and now we're opening it up as a platform. And so you'll be able to say, my custom objects, my custom fields, these are what predict things, and here's where those predictions go. The other thing that we've got a builder for that is not quite out yet is the chatbots. So when people say stuff that kind of looks like this, and we're going to use the language and intent and sentiment kind of stuff underneath that to figure out the 15 different ways to say, when's my order coming, right? So those are all things that we're trying to get there. And then under that, we have what we call platform services. And so these are some of the things that we're using for things like Prediction Builder and our chatbots. But we also have these available as APIs for our developers, and in some cases, our admins to be able to build stuff with. And so these are really, the ones we're looking at today are really APIs for prediction and classification of unstructured data. Today we're talking about text. We're not doing Einstein Vision today, but the thing I'm going to show you has all that stuff in it, so you can go to one place and get all of the wrappers for all of these things. All right, so as I said, this is kind of a weird session because it's not exactly a product, and it's kind of something special. So in terms of what's GA, these APIs are completely legitimately supported by Salesforce. So if you call our API and you're getting some sort of error or something is not working, please call us, and we're supposed to fix that for you, okay? All of this is GA. Vision went GA last year at TDX, which was in the summer timeframe. The language for sentiment and intent went GA, I think, like December 19th, so right at the end of 2017. So there's nothing here that's not good there. So they're just APIs, and Cody the Bear, because they're Cody APIs, and you have to code. And then what a lot of people don't know, if you don't pay attention to all of our marketing stuff really closely, is that every enterprise and above org has like 2,000 predictions a month that we've just given you as sort of a freemium tier of this. And so for some customers who are sort of on the small end, or they have like, my use case is like, you know, like not that much data, or like a small work department or something like that, they're like, hey, I can build out the predictive models and stuff for free, which is totally cool. And some people are like, oh, this lets me prototype for free, and then if I find something that's really useful to me, then I may decide to license some more of this stuff. So that's our idea, is to make this something that you can play with. You don't have to call us and provision free trials or anything like that. Just make it easy. All right, so we, in sort of platform marketing, and then another guy, Renee, who's did some sessions, who works in developer evangelism, we said, the APIs are really cool. It's going to be years before we have productized versions of all this kind of stuff. Let's write the Apex wrappers so that everyone is not having to write their own wrappers. And let's write the Lightning components and build a UI and connection for on top of all of this. And there's two reasons for that. One is it lets you use it without being a coder, okay, and lets you do some really cool things that we'll do today. And if you are a coder, you can use our stuff as examples and all the Apex calls and classes and authentication and some of the stuff that's kind of not fun to deal with, you can not have to do that part. So the important thing here, these are not supported by Salesforce. These are on our personal GitHubs, and they're just open source code. So I love it. If you have any problems, please tweet at me or stick an issue on GitHub. I will do my best to fix it. But they're not officially supported by Salesforce. I owe you nothing. Treat it as code you found on the side of the road from some guy that you met on the internet. Okay. All right. We're going to do 3 things today with this stuff that we have, and then time permitting, we'll just kind of look around the rest of it and give you a tour. We're going to take standard model. So we have a standard sentiment model, positive, negative, neutral. We're going to hook that up in Process Builder and store those results on a custom object, okay? Which is mildly interesting. The second one is more interesting, which is I have data that's already in Salesforce, and I've already got it classified. Maybe humans have been doing this job for a while, but I wish they didn't have to. How do I create my own custom model with no code, not having to access the naked APIs, and create a model for that? Then I can get predictions from in Process Builder. And then the third thing we're going to do is anytime you get one of those predictions and it's wrong, we would like Salesforce to say, oh, someone changed that and fixed that prediction. I now want to feed that back into the model so that my model gets smarter over time. Okay? Super simple, no code required, and hopefully pretty fun. That is all the slides that I could possibly stand. As a developer, sometimes you're like, no. All right. So break out a PowerPoint, and I'm going to start here with our object. So in my completely fictitious scenario, I have a company, and we have partners, and our partners give us feedback. And so we have you can imagine an app or a partner community, or maybe they email you or whatever. Somehow these things come in and they go into the feedback object. And our feedback object looks like this. I'll just click on one so I can go the fast way. Because the object setup is probably the first thing you have to do here. So you can see I have this field called comment. And this is where people put all the feedback. So just imagine you get comment cards, but this is the digital version. And then I've got some custom fields that I've created, just regular custom fields, where we can store the sentiment, which is either going to be positive, negative, or neutral. And then I've also got a field here called category, because I get all these comments from my partners, and sometimes they're complaining about my apps, right? Sometimes they might be complaining about my marketing materials, and then sometimes they might be complaining about the actual product itself. And I don't know what our fictitious company does, but I want to get these comments to the right departments and notify the right people, right? And so rather than someone having to sit and read all the comments, I'd like to automatically classify them and notify people correctly. And so that's my really simple custom object. And so what we have here, you can see I've got the sentiment and then the sentiment probability. So you can optionally track the probability that comes back, because it's positive, but there's a difference between 95% positive and 51% positive, right? And so I'll show you what this looks like in Process Builder. And I'm gonna start a new Process Builder for you. So the idea here is that these are all Apex wrappers, and they have invocable classes on them, so your admins can use them in Process Builder. And so I'm gonna call this TDX demo. When a record changes, and we're going to use that feedback object that we just looked at. Make sure I have more fields. Okay, good. And so the first thing that we want to do is get this sentiment. And so the criteria for when this thing runs is that we want no sentiment, and we do want a comment, right? So if that field is null, it's going to not like the fact that it's null. So we can just describe that in Process Builder. So is null is false. That means there is something there. And then we don't have a sentiment yet, because if we've already scored it, we're not going to use that. So this one is true. So pretty simple. And then the way this works is because we've created all these Apex wrappers for you, you can call the Apex action, and then the only thing you need to do, I'll just call it get sentiment. The only thing that you need to do with this is choose which of these that we're doing. So we're going to have it analyze our text. And you'll see the 3 required fields pop up. Okay? And so what we're going to tell it is, where's the text? All right? And that's in our comments field. Okay? Where do you want to put the text? Which is in a sentiment field. And then we need the record ID, because we're going to make that call out to the Einstein API, and when we get back the result, we need to know where to save it back. And so I will use a field reference to get our record ID. Okay. This is the simplest version. So the sentiment model that we're using is the community sentiment model, and that means it's sort of the public one that you don't have to have a model ID. It's going to call it by default. So what we're going to do is we're going to save that and activate it, because that's what we do in Process Builder. And then I'm going to go back to our feedback, and I'm going to create one. So new feedback. Bam. Let's fix it. This is what all of your cases look like. And I'm not going to put the sentiment on it because that would be cheating. And so what you're going to get back is that sentiment number, except that I broke it. Live demos. All right. Bonus points if you know what I did. Yeah? Yeah, but I actually want the names here. Like, I don't want to go grab the text from that field. I want it because what's going to run is it's going to say grab the text from this field and put the result in this field. That's good. That's totally possible. Yeah. I do have the worst case scenario, which is, what did I do that was working before? Oh, that's what I want. I want the comment to be changed, not the fact that there is no comment there at all. Let's try that. It's been a long week for me. All right, so I'm going to clone that. And what I was going to do as the next step is to bring in that probability. But since I'm already back in Process Builder and I've already cloned it and I already wasted like 2 minutes of your time, I'm going to do that in one shot. All right, so I'm going to take this, and we're going to say that it is changed. Nope, not that. This comment is changed. I swear I'm going to get this right for y'all in a second. That's right. So there is no sentiment, and the comment changed. Yes. Thank you. This is the best audience ever. All right. Sorry they don't let me do the keynotes. I wouldn't be able to hear you, right? Okay. And then the last thing I'm going to do in this is, I just activated it. I said I was going to store the probability as well. And this is where in Process Builder, if you've created these invocable apex, you can specify other fields that the admin could choose. So the required stuff shows automatically, but in this case, I'm going to add and I'm going to try activating that. And we'll do one new feedback. Okay. We read all your feedback. All right. And so when that feedback gets created, we're making a call out. So that's going to, if you're an Apex person, that's an @future with callout equals true. Oh my gosh. Oh, if I change it? Like that? Let me just take the whole thing off.
No, just go back to your record and then change the comment.
I did. I put a space on the end. Yeah. I did. All right. Let me show you what works. All right. Here's what I have. This should be, there is no sentiment, is null true, right? And the comment is changed. And I think the only thing, I can't even imagine what else I may have missed. Oh, it's the or. All right. I want either of those things, right? Because if someone changes the comment, I want to rescore it. And if there's no sentiment, that's what it is. Because otherwise, the and doesn't make any sense. Okay. All right. So that's what we're doing in Process Builder. And for the rest of it, I'm just going to use the one that I know works. All right. So technically, we should now have working sentiment probability. Yes, right? I'm feeling extremely negative. And you can see that probability score that's in there. And so what this lets us do, because these are just regular fields, we could like chart all of our probability. I can make a graph of how much our customers love or don't love, whatever it is they're telling us. And the other thing you saw is that this products category topic got scored. Okay, and so that's the next thing, because sentiment analysis of community sentiment might work well for you if your people kind of talk like the general public. Okay, I was speaking to someone in the audience who makes like medical devices, and maybe doctors don't give the same feedback and use the same language, and maybe what negative is for a doctor is like a word that most people don't normally use, So if you start to have those types of things, then the question becomes, oh, how do I make my own model with my own data? Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. And so the package that I have installed is available on our GitHub. Renee and I built this, and it's going to be, I'll show you what the models look like in a second. But first, we're going to do the builder. And so this is part of the package. You'll get this. And so what we're going to do is kind of like what we did in Process Builder, but backwards. We're going to say, what kind of model are you building? In this case, we're going to do intent. This is where this topic model came from. And we're going to select an object, which in this case is our feedback. And then I'm going to tell it, of all the text areas that I have, where are the comments stored? And if you have existing classifications, where are those? So I have a bunch of feedback where people classified the topics, and then I'm going to create a custom model based on that. And so what that looks like is this topic. And then what this button does is it's going to grab the file. Okay? So you may have thousands of Salesforce records of something with some free text, and this could be, like in sales world, this is like opportunity comments or whatever, or this could be like customer service issues or feedback or any of those types of things. So what it's doing is it's building you a CSV file, and as you would imagine, it's a CSV file. And the first column is the text, and the second column is our classifications. And so what's nice about this is that you can export this from your Salesforce data. It's only going to get the rows where both of those are filled out, so nulls wouldn't make any sense. But the other thing this lets you do is you may need to go clean up some data. I've never met someone that's like, oh, my data is perfectly pristine. Usually it's like, oh, I have some things that are like old, or we don't have that product anymore. I wouldn't want that as part of my sample training data. Those things, some things may be relevant and may not be relevant. So cleaning data is not a horrible thing. But that's what the data looks like. And then what you get to do is to create a data set. And so you can do this in the API itself. You upload your CSV file through some actions and stuff. And this is our data set created. Okay, so where did my data set go? You're going to want to go look over in the playground that gets installed as part of this. And so this is probably, we're only going to use a little slice of this, but I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of some of the other things. So the very first thing that we do when we set this up is there's a custom setting where you're going to put in the email address that you use for your Einstein account, which you can go register for free, and you get, like I said, all those predictions. And then there's also a security file. Has anyone registered for an Einstein account before? You get that .pym file, okay? So you're going to upload that .pym file as a file in this org, and that's where it's using for your security certificate. So basically, that email is in custom settings, and you have this security certificate stored in files, and that's what we're using to authenticate you for all of this. And so then, any models that you've made are available here. And so I can see image models and classification models, and then we just did an intent model. And that will probably be the last one, feedback, topic by comment, which is good. And so you can see I have some models. I don't have any models yet. I have some labels, because all we've done so far is build a data set. And so in the Einstein API's world, a data set is just this collection of data, and then that's used to train a model. So you may have the same data, and you may train several different models a few different ways. And so what we've done is make it easy for you to be able to call train on that model. And so what that's going to do is return a model ID. And then if I go back to our Models tab, I'm going to see that this one is going, and it has a model ID. My observation has been it kind of stays on 0 for a little bit, and then it stays on 1% for a little bit, and then it gets through the rest of it really quickly. And so rather than take your time on that, I'll show you pretty much what we do with that in our existing previously built model. You would take this model ID, and then this goes back in your process builder. And so once I've got my model trained, and we'll check back on it in a second to see if it's going, I have similarly challenging OR logic on the second node of this for comment. So just like we did for there's no sentiment and you change the comment, there's no topic and you change the comment. And here, there's a few extra fields that we've done. Because we're using a custom model that we just built, we tell it, the two types here are, I'll just clone it. I'm not going to use it for real. I'm just going to clone it. I promise not to break it. So you can choose sentiment or intent. And then here, this is that model ID, right? And so next week, you may add some more training data to it and run a new model and get a new model ID, and then you could come and update it here. Okay, there's some, you can also retrain it and use all that new and keep the same model ID, and then you don't have to update your process builder, right? But you may be like, oh, that model was really bad. I want to completely run a new one. So let's check on that real quick. Refresh the models. Oh, we're at 1%. Okay. So you could update it with this new model ID. And then that's how, when I ask for my feedback, I can get that same classification field. And so I say this, your app is running slow and crashes on my BlackBerry 3. Right? So then after that callout completes, I would call that neutral, right? And again, app comments may be a little bit different from general sentiment comments. And so if I've got all these things classified, I can also build a custom sentiment model with the stuff that we tend to have. We did actually get the category correct here, which is kind of nice. And then if I'd wanted to, I could have put a probability field for the topic. And there's also one other option that you'll see in our invocable Apex here, is that you can store the raw results. Because a lot of times we give you back the top answer, is kind of what it's doing now. But if it's like, we think it's 60% apps and 40% something else, you may want those full things. And they just get posted in as JSON. And so if we created a custom text field, we could then store those results in it and maybe use that for some other things. So there's some options there. And then the last thing that we were going to do with our model is this. And here the logic is and. This is the last one I made. So we want to have a situation where, let's say the model comes back and says, oh, this is related to your apps. And you read that and you're like, that's really not about the apps. That's about the product itself that the app is connected to. And a human has to go in and flip that pick list from apps to products. So what we want to do there is call one of the APIs that we have for adding new examples to the model, okay? And so if we go back to our playground and look at our model, which should be done by now. Really? Still? Okay. What you'll see is that we have 11 marketing and 12 products and 14 apps, okay? 11, 12, and 14, okay? And so what I'm going to do is if I flip to this and I say, hey, robot, you're actually not very smart. Technically, that's more of a marketing problem because we were supposed to tell everybody that we deprecated the BlackBerry a while back, and nobody that was a BlackBerry user got those communications. That email totally didn't go out and all that. then you might be like, okay, this really is marketing feedback and not the product team's fault. And so then when I change that, what you'll see when we go back to our examples here, before I refresh, 11, 12, 14, so we need to see one more in the marketing category. So we should be 12, 12, 14, right? Nothing works today. Make sure that's the active one. Yeah. So I manually changed the topic, and the comments didn't change, right? Yeah. Okay. We'll blame the products. All right. So what this is supposed to do, unless I'm using the, oh, you know what? Because this is the one I created that's not done yet. Okay. All right, strike 4. It's time to go home. This is the one that I created for y'all right now. The one that my process is actually hooked up to is this one, which is that's why we're starting, those numbers changed, all right? All right, no, someone knew that and didn't tell me? Okay. Yeah, this one we're not using that model ID yet because it's actually still running. Yeah, so the process builder, if you remember what we did, we're pointing these, what this one looks like is it's pointed at this model, right? So I'm giving feedback to a specific model, and it's adding to the data set that's associated with that model. And so here, like someone said earlier, I actually am taking the actual text. It's almost like when you looked at that CSV where it had like, here's the text, and then here's the category. That's what I'm doing here. Here's the text, and here's the category of what that should have been, and then add it to the data set for this model. So that's what this feedback loop process looks like. I'm going to walk you through a few of the other things that are part of this playground. And so one is the model details itself. And so if we look at this model that we're using here, there's this little tiny link called metrics. And what you'll see is display of what your labels are and some of the things that are going well and some of the things that are going badly, okay? So in the world of data science, anyone actually practice data science as like that's part of their job? Okay. This is a horrible data set, and this is a sucky model, okay? And this is what a horrible data set and a sucky model look like. I only have like 30 examples, right? And in real life, you would want hundreds of them, for each category. The other thing I have is that the model is finding difficulty telling between these different categories. And so you'll see that one of the things that showed up in marketing is correct, and 2 of the things are not, all right? And so 2 of the things that showed up under marketing are actually from the second item, which is products, okay? So this thing that's called a confusion matrix, that's how we look at, like of your 6 categories, 2 of them are actually really confusing, and the stuff looks a lot like each other, and the answers continually are wrong. That means you probably need to add some more examples there, and that's where that feedback loop, start correcting it, start to help. The other thing you'll see in here is that we have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things that were actually put through our test. And so what happens is, of the 33 examples that we have here, it's 34 now because I changed that one. Of the 34 examples that we have, a section of them is used for training data, for actually building the model, and then some of it is set aside for test data, where we get to put them against the model that we train and see how we did. And what Einstein is actually doing for you is going through your data and working different ways of looking at it so that it gradually gets to slightly better scores, okay? So for example, we call these training iterations epochs, and that's why you see that thing was running 1%, 2%, 3%, and sometimes it goes really fast. That's because the first epoch had some good results, and we're like, this is a pretty fantastic model. The test data turned out pretty good. What you see on this one is the fact that my data set sucks and it's really small. It's struggling to get to some good results. So the first run that it did, the test accuracy was 28. So like think back to middle school spelling tests when you get that 28 on it or whatever. That's what we got. And so you see it keeps running models until it finally finds something. The last one that ran down there that's 25, oh, that's a 71, right? And that's probably as good as you might possibly get on a data set this small. And so we're trying to show you some of the, how did we get to the conclusions we got to? And then if you actually look into any of these, you'll also be able to see some of the same confusion matrices. Okay, so what about this run of the model was confusing, and do I need more examples of this category, or do I need more examples of this category? So that's a little bit of the stuff that's in here, beyond just being able to call a model from Process Builder. The other thing that's in here that's a little bit useful is your prediction meter. All right, how many of these have I been using? And there's of course an API for this, but it's nice to have that as a component. All right, so I'm going to walk through just a little bit of the code that's associated with this. All right, so I'm going to actually start with the Apex classes. So what you'll see, and this is mostly not my work, this is mostly Renee's work. He's got Apex wrappers for almost every call that you make within the Einstein service. And so we're doing things like this is the class that I wrote for providing that feedback back to the model, making model corrections. And so if you think about what it would take to do all this myself, I've got a whole thing for handling the JWT authentication, all right? And then I've got, in this one, we're passing in these things that showed up in Process Builder, right? So every time someone wanted to do this kind of stuff as an admin, they would be writing these classes where they, pass in the model ID, pass in the text, and pass in the label, right? This is the playground controller. So all of those things that we're doing, like getting sentiment and all of those playground options, those are all here. And so we're also dealing with all 5 different model types. And so this gives you the chance to, like when I asked for that model metrics to get all of those confusion matrices and all that, that's actually what this was, is this call. And then the same thing with the learning curves. So all of this stuff has been done for you that you don't have to do. So part of it is getting it out of the wrapper from the Apex. And then the other thing you'll see as you start working with this is all of the Lightning components that are behind that. So when we looked at that, for example, confusion matrix, here's how we lay out those confusion matrices and maybe give them the proper colors based on if they're good or bad, green and red stuff that we were looking at. And then the other thing that's in the playground that's worth looking at is you can actually do sort of ad hoc predictions here. And so as you're building a model and as you're testing it, rather than building it in a process builder, you can pick your sentiment and say, those types of things, and then start to get back iterative things, right? And same thing with images. If you just need to upload an image and see, oh, there's 12 sheep in this picture. Did it correctly count all 12 sheep? I can do some really simple debugging and stuff that way. So all of this playground stuff is really meant for the person who's building the models to be able to set these things up. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to show you is where all this lives. Not my fork. So this is Renee Winkelmeyer. This is our joint GitHub project. And so it's got pretty decent instruction guides for it as far as to how to set it up. So if you're using SFDX things and you just want to spin it up in a Scratch org or push it into a sandbox that you have, you're able to do all of those things. He walks you through the PIM file and the email setup. And then he's got 2 modules that are on Trailhead, which also kind of walk you through how to get an Einstein account, how to get that security certificate, how to upload it. So if you've done those Trailhead modules, you may have like half of this stuff already done, and you can just slap the playground stuff in it. And then he's got some Apex examples and stuff here too. So that's where this lives on GitHub. And I am just going to show you the one slide here, which is not really interesting now, but probably interesting after the show when you want to take the slides home. So this is the link of the thing I was just showing you. The other thing that's interesting is the Einstein Docs. And so if you want to mess with some of these API calls and maybe as it changes over time, either contribute to this or take a look at them. You can see what those raw calls are in case you're doing this from Heroku or something that's not, the Apex wrappers don't help you somewhere else. And then there's the two trailhead modules on vision and intent that will kind of walk you through some of this stuff, including the setup. And so if you're interested in this and you don't know where to start, that's a really good place to do it. And with the balance of our time, my intent is to take all of your questions and then some. And again, apologies. Yes? Oh, do you mind using the mic? Because they record these things. Yeah, so if you have questions, go ahead and take these. You'll be on YouTube one day.
Cool. Let's say your company's in Canada.
Yes.
And you're reading customer feedback, customer comments.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be easy for Einstein to say, if this is in French, do French analysis. If it's in English, do English analysis? I'm sure you could do it, but would that be hard?
Yeah. The first part would be easy because I could show an example. I could do a training set of a bunch of French text and a bunch of English text. I could read the language really quickly. The sentiment, I think, right now is English only. They're doing some other languages, but what we've had to get is pilot customers who are basically willing to share stuff with us and kind of help build out those data sets. The community sentiment is probably the hardest one, right? But when you're training your stuff, if you want to train in other languages, that's probably not going to work as well as English because I think we've tested and spent the most time there. That's one where I would really reach out to our product team and be like, hey, we're trying to do a project, and by the way, it's in Canadian dialect of French. Can you please, and we'd be like, I think we would be excited to.
And if you could analyze, right? If you could
Yeah,
say,
well,
this looks like French, so I'll go run the French.
that part's easy.
That
But
part is easy. Oh.
yeah, but what we're doing in the actual language analysis is we're picking out phrases and like these three words go together, and so it's doing natural language processing kind of stuff, and so we're trying to get those patterns. And so if we don't have good French, or like maybe we do have French in progress, but if we don't have your language of choice in progress, that's one where we would want to work with you, and you're going to find things that aren't working very well as a someone who's native to that language, and then that can help us.
Okay,
Yeah. Yes. Do you mind taking a mic? Okay. Or either one closer. While you're getting up, I'll take this one. Okay. Your question?
Yeah, I was trying to do something similar to what you did, but I wanted to take it one step further, where if you get a negative sentiment, create a case,
Yes.
process builder.
Yes.
That was really easy. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to use that case and train the set further, like kind of how machine learning is supposed to work. So, but what you did is you basically changed the picklist value and then said retrain. So how do we make it in that fortuitous cycle on its own?
Is in the this is why. So the underlying Apex classes, there is a retrain call. That's my retrain button is calling this Apex. So what you would just do is write an invocable Apex around that. So the same way that I'm wrapping the get prediction, you would wrap the retrain. Okay. The reason I didn't do that, the product team asked me not to do that. I mean, I don't think they want every time someone changes something, like imagine a large company in a big call center, every time someone, like that's not an efficient way to retrain the model. You might want to schedule that once a night or something like that. And retrain is kind of cool because it actually retrains it, and you can keep using your existing model, and then as soon as the training is done, it just swaps them out without you having to do anything.
But could you use another object to train
Yeah.
something else?
Yeah. I did cases the first time, and then the product team's like, I don't do cases. We're building that automatically. So, yeah,
okay.
Case classification is it's either in the product now or it's part of what's about to be out. So we didn't think it was a good example. Custom objects were more, everybody can do it. Yes, your question.
Really, the question. So you can train model on your data and reuse that.
Mm-hmm.
But usually it doesn't work this way because you need to train some model, investigate. Sometimes maybe take a pre-train model from Twitter sentiment analysis and retrain it on small data set and what you do have. So the main question, is it possible not to somehow import pre-trained models to use in API?
To import the model from something else, you mean?
Yes. Usually it's big work to tune and train a model.
Yeah.
And it's much application you just use that.
Yeah, probably the easiest way to deal with that is if you've got the underlying data from another model, is that you would want to upload that CSV And so back in our little playground is if I
It's
went.
not about just data.
Yeah.
Because probably you need to let you meta parameters.
Yeah, we're trying to abstract all of that for you. There are some parameters to the actual train command that are in the underlying APIs, and I'm trying not to surface all that because there's some complexity there. But you can, for example, you can dictate the test and training split. You can dictate how many training iterations you want it to run, because I mean there is an overfit. You know, like, oh, you've trained it too close.
Yes.
You know.
Because I have some experience.
Yep.
It doesn't work this way.
Yes.
Training and tools offered for model building seems extremely limited.
Yep.
They work on some prototype, but it will not work in real application.
Yeah, and I think that's where this is a specific unstructured text field. So we're scoping it down in terms of what we're doing, and we're trying to either classify or I have 6 choices. Which one seems to be matching the best? Yeah, if you get into the scenarios, you might want to look at the underlying docs, because you may be like, okay, I need to say that this stuff, and the other part of that is just the data set itself. These things don't belong in the data set. This thing is old, and some of that becomes, if you're a developer, some of that becomes business domain knowledge, where someone could be like, oh, this should not be in there, and here's why, and you're like, oh, the model wouldn't have known that. Yeah, good question. Yes.
Have you had any experience using this with emails? I know you'd probably have to parse out a lot of email thread text and stuff to get the actual initial email.
Yep.
Have you worked with that?
What I did originally when I built this was email to case, because the email and then the email body becomes the case description, and the subject of the email becomes the case subject. So I was like, what if I concatenate the subject and the description field from the case and take that as a blob of text? What can I predict off of that? So yeah, the getting the email part in is probably email to case is the easiest way to do it. If you're building an Apex email service, there are some classes for getting the body of that and then sticking it in a custom object. I think one time, a long time ago, I wrote the email to anything, just kind of stored in this field, and that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Also, you said you have 2,000 calls that you get per enterprise org. So if you have if you want to run a bulk analysis of a bunch of text, a bunch of different records,
yeah,
each one of those counts against that limit.
So analysis, you mean predictions off of existing text?
Yeah, if I wanted to predict 1,000 emails, that'd be 1,000 against the 2,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if I just sent them at one time.
Yeah.
Okay.
They count predictions.
Okay.
And there's not actually a bulk call to that prediction API. I think here's the stuff, give me back a result. So you would parallelize those or something.
Cool.
Most people are less interested in predicting their old stuff than using their old stuff for training and then predicting forward, but it's a good test,
So you can do training on the old stuff, and that's not
Yes.
limited.
We actually do training. So if you want to different models all day long, that's nothing, right?
Okay.
And then you finally get one that you're like, this works really well for my users. Out.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.